is going to continue to be true to himself, and then, blah, 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 looking in the mirror, nobody changed me, blah, blah, blah. Now, a lot of people look at that, and to an extent, this point of view is correct and respectable, but a lot of people look at that and go, well, I can respect that, like, everyone should always stay true to themselves and, be who they are. Completely agree. But we're not just talking about a general, concept here. We've got, like, specific examples that we're citing and referring to, not just a general theory on life. So where I have an issue with Cam is I don't buy it. I don't think that's the case, or the majority of the case with him. I think with him, it's not so much a staying true to yourself as it is a refusal to grow personally. It's being closed off to personal growth. And that's where there's a fine line. We say all the time here, there's two sides to every coin. Yes, some of it is him staying true to himself and being who he is, and accepting who he is, and that's it. Don't get me wrong, that is some of it. But there is also some of it is refusing to grow or learn or mature. So any person anywhere in life, that can come into play, and you gotta, it's like I said, it's a fine line between those two things. But I feel, you know which side I personally feel Cam falls on. Now, all that being said about, me not liking Cam or whatever, it doesn't bother him. It shouldn't bother you. It doesn't bother me, But ultimately, it makes no difference. The dude's winning games. He's playing extremely well. He's extremely talented. And he will try to become the third Heisman Trophy winning quarterback ever to win a Super Bowl trophy, along with Joe Montana and Joe Namath. But whether or not you love Cam Newton or not, too many knots in there, I don't know. He was the MVP of the league this year, throwing for 35 touchdown passes, in addition to running for 10 touchdowns. He had over 600 rushing yards on the ground as well. The rest of his passing statistics, not good. Like, quarterback rating was decent, like definitely top 10, maybe tied for 5th, somewhere between 5th and 10th. But passing yards, not very impressive. Yards for attempts, fairly, that yards for attempts might have been okay too. Interceptions, mediocre. Completion percentage, absolutely awful. Atrocious. He had one of the 5 worst completion percentages on his passes in the entire league. Yet this is your MVP. Just because his team went 15-1, he's the only guy on the offense whose name anybody knows. Must be the MVP, right? This lack of thought and criteria that's gone into league MVPs now in all of our pro sports is, well, that's a balls deep thought, actually, for probably a different episode. Maybe this one, never know. And then, to me, to top it all off, in this game, now that we've talked about both quarterbacks, they're polar opposites. I mean, one's at the very end of his career, one is just entering the prime of his career, one is big and fast and athletic and strong, and the other one is, well, he's kind of big, but, he can barely throw the ball down the field, can't move, different styles, different just different everything, polar opposites, so it's a really interesting and historic matchup. It could be a passing of the torch in some regards from the old guard Manning to the new guard Cam Newton, or it could be the grand riding off into the sunset for Peyton, as well as possibly the learning experience for the next guy that he then takes and uses to win a couple Super Bowls in the future. But I don't know about you. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know about you, but I'm sick of talking quarterbacks. Quarterbacks get so much freaking attention. I apologize for giving so much quarterback attention, but again, I can't help it. Like with the teams we got, with the storylines we got, that's the most interesting stuff going into the Super Bowl 50. But let's get out of quarterbacks. Let's get to the other one or two main storylines. Try and break down what each team is going to be trying to do or need to do to win the game, and then get my predictions before moving on with the rest of the sports talk for this week's show. And so we transition from the leaders of the offense to the leaders of the entire teams, and that would be the head coaching matchups here for the Super Bowl. We have on one side Ron Rivera, head coach of the Carolina Panthers, in only like his third or fourth year as a head coach of the Panthers, and that was his first head coaching gig anywhere too, going up against Gary Kubiak, of head coach of the Denver Broncos. Now, very interesting fact, both these men, Ron Rivera and Gary Kubiak, have played on teams that have made it to the Super Bowl in their playing careers. They were both NFL players. And so they become the 6th and 7th people in NFL history to both play in a Super Bowl and be the head coach of a team in a Super Bowl. And I do not know whether or not this is the first time that any of said individuals on that list have faced off against each other in the game. That I'm not sure. Now, Gary Kubiak, this is his first year coaching the Denver Broncos. However, this is not his first year as a head coach in the NFL. He was the head coach of the Houston Texans for the last several years before coming to Denver thanks to good buddy John Elway. Kubiak actually played as a backup quarterback behind Elway for many years with the Denver Broncos. Ron Rivera played most of his career with the San Diego Chargers, not the Carolina Panthers. But Ron Rivera, I'm not sure if he won it, if they've announced it yet or not, but he certainly should have been this year's Coach of the Year award winner in the NFL. He has done a remarkable job turning that franchise around, working with very little talent at some of the positions on that team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and just finding a way to not only develop young players in a young team into being really good individual players, but getting them to gel and mesh, and that can be hard to do when you've got multiple very big, large personalities on your team, as is the case with the Carolina Panthers. And I think in that regards, in many regards, this Carolina Panthers team from this year feels a ton like the Seattle Seahawks of the last 2 years, really built on youth and athleticism and strength and speed, really good defense, really good running game, a quarterback that can make plays on his own when needed to in the passing game, no-name receivers. There's a lot of similarities. So I think you've got a new age model team in the Panthers that have very little weakness. They have some, but very little weakness, going up against a Denver Broncos team that just while they're extremely good at what they're good at, they're not all that good at the things they're not good at, and there are more things that they're not good at than the Panthers. Now, the final storyline that's kind of acting as a merger into the breakdown would be the defenses. These are the two best defenses in the league going up against each other, depending on, take your pick of most important stat. The Carolina Panthers defense allowed the fewest points of any defense in the NFL this year. In my opinion, the most important defensive stat, without question. That being said, the Denver Broncos were the best total defense this year, which goes by, how many total yards, both rushing and passing, that a defense gives up. They allowed the fewest total yards of any defense in the NFL this year. Now, they became the 12th team in NFL history to lead the league in that defensive category and make it to the Super Bowl. Of the previous 11, 9 of them have won the Super Bowl. Only 2 of those 11 defenses have ever lost in the Super Bowl. So if you're looking for a reason or an extra reason to pick the Broncos, the underdog this week, there you go. It's definitely the defense, but Carolina's got an amazing defense too, and honestly, their defense is more talented. It just is. They've got 2 defensive tackles that are super studs. They've got 2 linebackers that are super studs. Although one of their stud linebackers, Thomas Davis, I believe. Yes, Thomas Davis. He has a broken arm that he has had surgery on, and he says he's going to play with. We'll see. Now, most people think that Luke Kuechly is the best defensive player on that team, is definitely the best linebacker on that team. When I looked at the statistics at the end of the season, Kuechly was actually the second best linebacker on that team statistically, behind Thomas Davis, and you can't even argue it. The only way you could argue that Kuechly was better this year than Davis for that Carolina Panthers linebacking core is if you watched all the film. I haven't seen a lot of the game footage, so I can't know for sure just based off of the numbers. But what I can tell, based off of the numbers, is that Davis had a huge impact on that team this year and was a key component in their success. And so how much he's able to contribute could be a key factor in this game. And then they've got a pair of amazing corners as well for the Panthers. So really the only places you can attack the Panthers defense would be at the defensive ends and the safeties. That's where you got to hit the Panthers defense. Everything else is pretty rock solid, impenetrable. Now on the Broncos side, it's the same but not. The Broncos have 2 incredible shutdown corners, just like the Panthers do, very similar. However, the Broncos have at least 1 excellent safety, maybe 2, and their linebackers are more on the outside, as well as their defensive linemen. They have good defensive ends, not so much in the defensive tackle or the middle linebacker position. So if you're going to attack the Denver Broncos defense, you want to attack it right up the gut, right up the middle. That's, your other places you got some good players there. And like I said with the Panthers, it's kind of vice versa. Panthers, you want to attack outside at the line of scrimmage, and then the deep middle of the field would be those are your 2 points of attack against the Panthers defense. So look for that in the play calling, at least first half of the game until adjustments are made and stuff. But based off of personnel, that's definitely what each team should be looking at as far as, if there's a chink in the other team's defensive armor. But either way, you've got a great defense versus a great defense, and that should make for a great game. And I think all anybody really wants is a great, entertaining, competitive game, unless your team is the Panthers or the Broncos, then you don't